You guys, my kids love books. They love books so much and they can't even read, but they are really excited to learn how to read and we're in the process. And I think some of their excitement comes from the fact that we read so many books and we always have. And so in this video, I wanted to give an updated list as to our favorite read alouds. And so I'm talking read alouds more for the 6 to 7 year old, 5 to 7 year old range. I think it was last spring I put out a video about my favorite read alouds for 4 and 5 year olds, which I'll link above. I love all those books as well, but these are, as the kids are getting a little bit older, what we've been reading and what they've been loving. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to my channel if you're new here, or welcome back if you have been coming for a while. So like I said, I'm planning on sharing our favorite read aloud books, but I also wanted to include my kids' favorite audiobooks because like I said, they are not reading themselves and we don't really do devices around here, so they get really unlimited access to audiobooks. As long as I like the books, obviously. But they have gone through a ton of audiobooks and they have some favorites. And I thought that would be fun to share as well because in this range of 6 to 7, kids are just starting to read. Some have taken off, some have not. And so audiobooks are a great resource for keeping them reading, even if they can't physically read the book themselves. So let me hop in and start with our favorite read alouds. I'm just gonna share our absolute favorite. And it's probably because I love this so much, but we've been reading Harry Potter. We're about halfway. We're currently reading number 2. I've been picking up the illustrated copies because they're just more fun to read aloud. So last fall we read the first book, and now in the summer we're reading the second book. So my kids are 6 and 7, and the plan is to read one a year. And we'll see how well that goes if they let me do that, but I just think they get progressively scarier and darker and things like that, which I know, and my kids are not ready for that. There's even some parts in like number 2 that I'm going to probably be doing a little bit of paraphrasing, like the part with all the spiders. But they love this book to the point where we have gotten the audiobook and they'll just listen to it over and over because they just really enjoy the story. The next book we really enjoyed was Poppy by Abby. And this is just such a cute story about a little mouse as the family is fighting against this evil owl, and she kind of gets them in trouble, but then she saves them a bit. It's just such a cute story. And this actually led the kids to picking up the second book via audiobook, which I'll show you in just a second. But we did read Poppy as a read aloud and we loved it. The next book we read, which I really enjoyed, is The Water Horse by Dick King Smith. And it does have some more dated writing, but the story was captivating enough that my kids were really interested in it. And it basically is that these children found this egg on the seashore in Scotland, I believe, or somewhere up there. And then they took it home and put it in the bathtub and it hatched. And then they had this like dragon monster creature that they started raising, and then start getting bigger and bigger, and just kind of the antics of that and how they had to move it around. And it's just very fun. The idea is it's kind of like the Loch Ness Monster. Where did that come from? And this book is like, oh, it came from these kids who found an egg on the shore. So it's really cute. And it was a very quick read. It's a very thin book. Another one we enjoyed. My kids really liked it, but I do have a few disclaimers. But the story is The Tale of Despereaux. And this is by Kate DiCamillo. I read this ahead of time just because the reviews were a little bit polarizing. Either people loved it or they thought it was terrible. And I just needed to kind of read it for myself. So I did pre-read this one before reading it out loud, but my kids really liked it. The part that I did the most paraphrasing in this book was the part of the girl. I don't know if anybody's read this, where her name's, I think, Miggery Sow. Her father was a terrible man who sold her to this man who made her call him uncle, and then he mistreated her, like he would hurt her. And what I didn't like about that aspect is it usually would say something like, and he would box her ears or something like that. And I don't know, that makes it almost sound fun, but really he's hitting her. And so like we had to kind of talk about that and be like, wow, there is some terrible people who would hurt children in this way, and that is not okay, and that is not fair to this little girl. But she's a vital part of the story, so it's not just thrown in there for no good reason, although I think it spends a little too much time. So I went a little quickly through that and I got my kids to kind of get the gist of it, but otherwise they really liked it. There was a little bit of dark action where you're talking like rats and dungeons, and it was a little scary and tense, but they handled it. At 6 and 7, they were fine with that. So I really enjoyed that book, and I thought it was really clever, and it uses a lot of big words, which was just really fun. Another book that we read and really liked this year was this book. So Lulu Walks the Dog. My kids laughed the entire way through this book. Like, it was just funny. It's short. It's about this girl who has this goal, which you don't know what it is. She wants money for something, and you don't know what it is the whole time. But she starts walking dogs to earn money, and she's just kind of grouchy and out for herself. And then there's this little boy that helps her, and she's just kind of mean to him. And her character grows throughout this book, but it's told in a funny way, which is just made it really enjoyable, and my kids found it very funny. And then we also picked up the first Zoe and Sassafras book, so Dragons and Marshmallows, and my kids love this, especially my daughter. My daughter probably loved it more, but my son loved it too because it was about science and setting up an experiment for what does this dragon eat sort of idea. So it was very short and very fun. So they really enjoyed this. We'll probably be picking up more of these soon. The next book they loved. So they loved this book. So it's Nathaniel Flood, Beastologist. This is book 1. So we are definitely getting more in this series, and it was just a fun story. It's about this boy who's orphaned. His parents died. He is brought to his aunt, who then is like this beastologist. So she studies rare beasts or exotic beasts or something like that. And she says that's like a family thing. We've all done it. That's actually what your parents are doing. And so she wants to train him. And so they kind of go on their first mission, quote unquote. And it's just really good. My kids really enjoyed it. They were rooting for him, and they wanted to know what would happen. And there really was not that many scary parts in here. There's a few ideas of kind of some tense parts, like they're going to get found out, but nothing that a 6 and 7-year-old couldn't handle. So that was really good, and we're going to look for the next in that series. Speaking of very outdated series, my son loves the Hardy Boys books. And it's funny because you have to kind of explain some of the wording, or I have to look up some of the wording, or ask my husband. I was like, what's a jalopy? And I think that was it. An old beat up car, right? Am I saying that right? I forget. Anyway, so he's been loving these. These my daughter does not like. She does not like when we get to Hardy Boys, but that's okay because we read some that are more for her and some that are more for him. But he really enjoys these books, and there's like 60 of them. So it's definitely a love that I want to plant, and then maybe he could take off with when he starts reading on his own. And then a couple books I don't have copies of because I already sold the curriculum is Cappy Boppy. Super cute book. It's about this capybara, which is this big rodent from South America who gets brought home by one of the children to become a pet. And it works out until it doesn't, and it's pretty funny. And my kids just really enjoyed the antics of this little capybara, and it was just very fun. The other one they really liked was Egyptian Diaries. We got into Egypt here this past spring, and they really enjoyed that. And this book was very age appropriate for 6 to 7-year-olds. It tells a story of this boy as he's being trained to be a scribe in ancient Egypt. His dad's a scribe, and then it kind of follows his day-to-day life. It's set up in a diary form, but it's very attainable. There's no like big bad curse breaker sort of thing. You know how some of those books are all about kind of like action and adventure? This was more about like what's the life of the day-to-day scribe. There was a little bit of action involved, but not very much at all. It was very manageable for their age, and they kind of got a glimpse into what it would feel like to be a kid in ancient Egypt. So I highly recommend that, especially if you are doing an Egypt unit. So like I said, my kids are loving audiobooks, and sometimes I listen to these books kind of on repeat. So Harry Potter, like I already mentioned, was one of those that they'll just kind of listen to over and over until they get sick of it. And we love getting those because if you've never listened to the audiobook for Harry Potter, it's excellent. I feel like there's some of the best audiobooks out there just because of the narrator. They also picked up Ragweed, which was the next, actually this is the one before Poppy. And there's other ones we've read. So like Poppy and Rye, Poppy Returns, other books that they've gotten via audiobook. Since we read Poppy out loud, they just kind of continued with the series, which I love about audiobooks. The next set of books I realized were actually on my last list, my 4 to 5-year-old list. But these are the ones they're reading on audiobooks because they already love the characters, such as these books. So The Wild Robot and The Wild Robot Returns, they'll just listen to again and again on audiobook. And then it's great because we've already read the story. And these ones we read last year too. So My Father's Dragon, they listened to on audiobook this year. All the Ralph S. Mouse books, it's all on audiobook. They listened to those. We actually did read this last year. I felt like it was one of the more advanced ones that we read that probably would have been better suited for 6 to 7 versus 4 to 5, but they did like it. And now my son has listened to all 4 of the Vanderbeeker books and just loves them. My daughter, not as much, but my son really loves these. So these are great. And then another one I had on last year's list was the Anna Hibiscus books. And so they've listened to these on audiobooks. All the Anna Hibiscus goes to Canada. There's so many different ones. And they've listened to all the ones we can get a hold of on audiobook. And then they've listened to all of the Chronicles of Narnia. And they love them all. And they'll just sometimes just listen to them over and over. And I love our copy of these books because they're color pictures. But we read a number of them last year. We haven't actually read them all out loud, but I think they have listened to them all on audiobook. And then my daughter. So we read this book this year, which probably should have been on our favorites list. So we read this last fall, I think, The Frog Princess, and she loved it. And then she listened to the rest of the books in the series. I think there were 7, until she would only listen to these. And I kind of had to cut her off because she got very into princesses and kissing and all these things, and I was like, I think you need some different books. And so I got her hooked on something else, and she was fine. She hasn't listened to these in a while, but she really did enjoy them. My son did not. He did not listen to them. He maybe listened to a couple of those, but they really were more my daughter. And then there was a number of books I did pick up. So I picked up the Sunlight Summer Readers, even though my kids still aren't reading, right? But I knew I wanted to have some good books on hand for when they do, just because I love books. And so I did pick them up. So here's some of them. What we did do though is we looked for audiobook versions of these books, and then my kids will just follow along in the book because there's pictures in the books, and then they'll have the audiobook going and they'll be reading this book. And my son loved this book. This is probably one of his favorites, House of Robots. And then my daughter, these ones are the ones my daughter listened to. She loved this. This is like a little mystery book. It's called The Case of the Stolen Sixpence. So she listened to this on audiobook and loved it. And there's more in this series, The Mysteries of Maisie Hutchins. We just couldn't get any more at the library, but we'll probably pick up more of these books because she really enjoyed them. And I love mysteries, so I want to get my kids into mysteries. And then this also came, and it's Mindy Kim and the Lunar New Year Parade. So she listened to this on audiobook and followed along in the book. And then I think there was 2 other ones that we picked up, other Mindy Kims that she listened to as well. And then this one, the Snazzy Cat Capers, there was 2 of these on audiobook. There's actually 3 books total, it looks like, but she listened to these on audiobook. And then we have these for later. So I knew this was a good investment, but I love that I am not randomly picking books on my Libby app, you know, where I'm just like, oh, this probably is good. This has already been screened by Sunlight to know that it's age appropriate. It doesn't have kind of those maybe bratty kid behavior that some of the books at this age do. And so I knew that they were good choices, so I didn't have to pre-read them, and I could just get those on audiobooks. So it was great. My kids loved all of those stories. So anyway, I know those are a long list of books. Some we read out loud, lots they listened to. Hopefully you found a few that were new to you and that you could use with your kids. Let me know down below if you've read any of them, and also let me know, please, 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 let me know if you recommend any books for the 6 to 7-year-old, either read alouds or audiobooks. I will take all the recommendations. So that is all I have for this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and I will see you in the next homeschooling video. All right, have a wonderful day. Bye.